Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the third S.R. Nathan Distinguished Lecture organized by the Middle East Institute of the National University of Singapore and proudly sponsored by Keppel Corporation. Without further ado, let me please invite the Provost of the National University of Singapore, Professor Thani Chai, to come on stage for the welcome address. Professor, please.
His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Thani, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar, Mr. Sam Tan Chin Tiong, Singapore Minister of State, Prime Minister's Office, and Ministry of Manpower, His Excellency Ambassador Abdullah Ibrahim Al-Helma, Keppel Corp's Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Chan Hong Chiu, Professor Ho Eng Seng, Director of the Middle East Institute, Your Excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of corporate, education, and civil organizations, guests, colleagues, and friends. A very good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the National University of Singapore, I would like to welcome you to the third S.R. Nathan Annual Distinguished Lecture, organized by the Middle East Institute and generously sponsored by the Keppel Corporation. Before I proceed to introduce our distinguished guests and discuss Singapore and Qatar's close ties, I would like to say a few words about Mr. S.R. Nathan, our former president, who passed away recently. The lecture is named after him, and rightly so. Throughout Mr. Nathan's illustrious career in the civil service, he believed in the importance of fostering ties with the Middle East and the need to promote understanding about the region in Singapore. As an advocate of economic cooperation, he encouraged Singapore's business community to engage with their counterparts in the Middle East. As head of state, Mr. Nathan visited many countries in the Middle East, but he made a very important visit to Qatar in 2009. It was significant for two reasons. One, it was the first ever visit to Qatar by a Singapore head of state. And two, the visit marked 25 years of diplomatic relations between Qatar and Singapore. We hope to follow Mr. Nathan's example and further develop mutually enriching relations with Qatar and the rest of the Middle East. Where we are concerned, Qatar is distinctive. Qatar and Singapore share many parallels. Both are small countries with big ambitions and challenges. They are not afraid to punch above their weight in international and regional matters. Both countries nurture innovation and discovery to create a knowledge-based economy. This is a key area where two countries can learn from one another and benefit each other, building great universities. The strength and resilience of an economy today rests not on the size of its territory, but the depth and range of its human talent. Universities are thus the great enabler of where a nation and its economy need to go. We at the National University of Singapore are mindful of this responsibility and opportunity and have pursued research to create knowledge that is both deep and broad. So like us, Qatar has been very energetic in building its universities. We have begun a partnership in this venture and look forward to taking it to the next level. Starting with our youngest and brightest, the undergraduates, NUS has been bringing students to the Arabian Gulf and specifically Qatar for 5 years through our study trips for engagement and enrichment program, or STEER in terms of an acronym. In 2013, the Middle East Institute at NUS signed the Memorandum of Understanding with Qatar University. This memory is distinct to me as I was honored to sign it. The purpose of the MOU was to promote joint research and development activities, and has so far led to invigorating discussions between our researchers about security and political challenges in workshops that were held in Qatar as well as in Singapore. Further deepening our partnership, Qatar generously supported the Middle East Institute's Qatar Fellowship, which was officially launched last year. This fellowship helps us better understand business and economics in the Gulf and its implications for Asia. We hope to follow up with studies on business and economics in Asia and their implications to the Gulf. I have to thank Qatar once again for their generosity and look forward to seeing our universities grow together. Having listed the close links Singapore enjoys with Qatar, I'm honored and delighted to introduce our distinguished speaker, who will deliver the third S.R. Nathan Distinguished Lecture today. His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al-Thani was recently appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs, following a noteworthy career trajectory. His Excellency began his career in the Civil Service in 2009 at the Ministry of Business and Trade, following a posting at the Supreme Council for Family Affairs. During his time at the ministry, he focused on small and medium-scale state enterprises before taking on the position of Director of the Department for Public-Private Sector Partnership. He was then appointed Secretary of the Personal Representatives of His Highness the Emir for follow-up affairs at the Emiri Diwan in 2010, followed by further appointments to the rank of Assistant Undersecretary in 2011 and Undersecretary in 2012. In 2014, he was appointed Assistant Foreign Minister for International Cooperation Affairs before becoming Minister of Foreign Affairs in January this year. It is now my pleasure to invite His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed to deliver the third S.R. Nathan Annual Distinguished Lecture. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's truly a great honor to be here in Singapore and to address such a prominent audience. I am most grateful to the Middle East Institute and to its director, Professor Ho, and also to Professor Thani, the Deputy President of the National University of Singapore, the finest university in Asia, for inviting me to this unique event. This is the first MEI lecture since the recent passing of His Excellency Mr. S.R. Nathan, the former President of the Republic of Singapore. And on behalf of my government, I wish to express my heartfelt condolences to the government and the people of Singapore on the occasion of his passing. May his soul rest in peace. This is, in fact, my first visit to Singapore as Qatar's Foreign Minister. But I should note that my visit was preceded by His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, who came here last March to personally convey his condolences after the passing of the great Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's founder and the first Prime Minister. His Highness the Emir considered Mr. Lee to be one of the great pioneers and visionaries of the modern world and wanted to pay his personal respects. I was especially pleased to get an invitation to speak at the Middle East Institute today because it offered me an opportunity to meet government and business leaders and to discuss some of key policy issues that are crucial for our two nations. But selfishly, I was also pleased to have an opportunity to spend more time in Singapore. It's no secret that many of us in Gulf share a deep admiration for what you in Singapore have achieved. What you have accomplished against all odds is indeed a model for our young growing nations on the Arabian Peninsula, but also for the developing nations throughout the world. As most of you may know, Qatar and Singapore have had a long and friendly relationship. Your port, the largest in the ASEAN, has become a strategically important hub for Qatar's LNG exports, and Qatar is now the third largest trading partner of Singapore in the Middle East. I am also proud of the fact that Qatari companies are well represented here in Singapore. Doha Bank has a branch here since 2006, Qatar National Bank since 2008, Ooredoo, our national phone carrier, holds shares in StarHub, and Qatar Airways now operates 3 flights daily between Hamad International Airport and Shanghai Airport. And Qatar Investment Authority, our sovereign wealth fund, is also active here. QIA is making long-term investments designed to provide a secure income for our citizens for generations to come. These investments are also the glue that binds our two nations' long-term business partnership. But Qatar and Singapore have more in common than business. We are both young nations that are geographically small. Like Singapore, Qatar understand that the future of our nations depends upon 2 key factors: good governance and the development of our most precious resources, human capital. As Mr. Lee Kuan Yew once said, a nation is not great by size alone. It's the will, the cohesion, the stamina, the discipline of its people, and the quality of their leader, which ensure it an honorable place in history. So like you, we have pursued policies that make our government accountable to our people and transparent in its decision making. Yes, we are a monarchy and proud of it, but we have evolved a consultative form of government that is responsive to the needs of our people and which enjoys a level of support and legitimacy that most governments should only aspire to. We have promoted gender equality, and I am proud to say that women now occupy senior leadership and executive positions in our government and in private industry. And yes, women in Qatar do drive. I am asked that question a lot, though I am sorry to say that they drive as recklessly as men. Significantly, there has also been a dramatic increase in universities admissions for women. The girls now outnumber boys, which bodes well for gender equality in the future. Education is in fact a key driver in Qatar's development of a human capital. We know that our carbon-based economy will not last forever, and that we must move to a knowledge-based economy to provide a sustainable future for our children and grandchildren. Without a high-quality education, no progress can be achieved. We in Qatar realize this, and we have made education a priority. What you have done here in Singapore's National University, we have done at Education City in Doha. Their major universities from around the world share an extraordinary mega campus that allows students to study everything from political science to hard science, from archaeology to architecture. And yes, another question I am often asked, our students enjoy the same opportunities for free speech and open inquiry that they would have at the home campuses of these universities in the US, the UK, and France. We are following this path because we want to educate our children to be citizens of an interconnected world, where cities like Doha and Singapore will continue to attract leadership and talent from around the world and offer unparalleled opportunities for cultural and economic synergy. That's what being a hub will mean in the 21st century. We have even embedded human development into our foreign policy by providing aid and development assistance and even offering our mediation services as a proactive measure to help avert future conflicts. I was interested to read on the MEI website that you described Singapore as a crossroads of the world, much as we describe Qatar. As an aside, I was somewhat amused to see that your mission statement refers to the Middle East as West Asia, which perhaps unsurprisingly puts Singapore right at the heart of Asia. I am sure that every nation and every culture thinks of itself as being at the center of the world, and I suppose that we in Qatar are no exception. But over in West Asia, we have learned that engaging with the world requires tolerance for diversity and respect for minority cultures. So we are an Arab Muslim country that welcomes people of all faiths and ethnicities. This in turn has allowed us to engage with the many nations of Asia who have become our trading partner, our political allies, and our friends. We have also worked to maintain our friendship and our partnership with our neighbors throughout the Arabian Peninsula. But these, of course, are difficult times. I know many of you are following the developments in the Middle East closely. So I would now like to turn to a discussion of some of the challenges we are facing, including, of course, the ongoing crisis in Syria. But before I do, I think it might be helpful to outline the principles and goals of Qatar's foreign policy in broad stroke. In general terms, we seek to advance international peace and security by encouraging the peaceful resolution of international disputes. This is supported by our open door policy, which we will discuss further in a moment. And two, to support the right to self-determination. This is clearly applied to Palestine, but is also relevant to our views on the Arab Spring and on the counter-revolutions that have followed. And three, to refrain from interference in the domestic affairs of other states. If we expect others to respect our sovereignty, we should respect other sovereignties. And last, to cooperate with all nations that seek peace. And since Qatar took up a 2-year rotating seat at the UN Security Council in 2006, our nation has been an active mediator in cross borders and intranational conflicts in the Middle East, North Africa, and East Africa. As always, our objective has been to maintain global peace and security and to promote neutral relationship with all state and non-state actors. In all of our mediation efforts, we feel that we were able to achieve success largely because we always keep our doors open to all parties in every dispute. And today, Doha has earned a reputation as a neutral territory, a place where Fatah can talk to Hamas and where the US can negotiate with Taliban, and where rival faction can reconcile their differences. But there is no denying the fact that the Arab Spring and the counter-revolutions that followed have turned the Middle East upside down. In fact, the events of the past 5 years have resulted to the most significant changes in the political and geographical landscape of the Middle East since Sykes-Picot Agreement. In our view, the counter-revolution in many Arab states has unfortunately reversed the initial gains of freedom and liberty achieved by the people in the early years of the movement. Far worse, hundreds of thousands of lives have been lost, along with the hopes and dreams of entire generation. Meanwhile, Bashar al-Assad is holding the international community hostage to his desire to remain in power at any human cost. And nowhere is that more apparent than Aleppo, which has been mercilessly besieged by Assad regime for months on end. Qatar was forced to close its health center there this past weekend after our facility was repeatedly struck by bombs. 2 patients were killed and 8 wounded, and half of the clinic was destroyed, and in what Dr. Hisham Darwish from Qatar Red Crescent described as a war crime. The news on the diplomatic front is equally bad. As I'm sure you're all aware, talks between the United States and Russia that were meant to deliver a ceasefire in Aleppo have now broken down, leaving hundreds of thousands of civilians in mortal jeopardy. Ladies and gentlemen, the conscience of humanity is deeply shocked by such merciless and inhuman violence. The international community must intervene and bring the fighting in Syria to an end. And we must bring war criminals like Bashar al-Assad, who are conducting these mass murders, to justice. If the great global powers are unable or unwilling to bring the violence to an end, then we believe that the UN Security Council, under the authority of the responsibility to protect doctrine, must intervene. Geopolitics and sectarian divisions cannot stand by the way of peace. For this, we do know the longer the fighting, the greater the sacrifice of a human capital, and the more likely that desperate, hopeless young men and women will be radicalized and lured into the extremist camps. As we have seen, the disease of terrorism knows no borders. Inspired by radicals in the Middle East, young men and women in Europe, North America, Africa, and subcontinents, and yes, in the Far East, have taken the extremist cause. The extremists are a threat to us in Doha and to you here in Singapore and to the entire humanity. There are certainly a battle we will have to fight in the short term. The so-called Islamic State may be struggling, but it's not yet defeated. And despots like Bashar al-Assad are still in power in Syria. But in the longer term, we feel that our focus on good governance and the development of a human capital will triumph in the end, as we reinforce the foundations of responsive and transparent government and strengthen our commitment to the rule of law. We will meet the needs of our citizens. And as we create more opportunities for our people to reach their full potential, we will undermine the rationale for extremism. Qatar and Singapore share this commitment to the good governance and the development of a human capital. These are shared values. They form the bedrock of our friendship and our partnership. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity to address this prestigious gathering, and thank you again for giving me this opportunity to spend more time in Singapore. Thank you.